Council, it's getting close to our time, so if you want to turn your videos on, the clerk will make sure everything's working and ready to go. It'll just take us a second. The clerk is just making sure it's recording and everything is working well. Okay, thank you. So we'll call the 32nd session of council to order in open session at 7:01. We have a rise and report. We were in closed session for the better part of the last hour, and just rise and report that in the continuing interest of transparency and open government, the chair reports that in open session, the following outcomes from today's closed session meeting. The closed session minutes of June 22nd, 2020 were adopted as circulated and amended, and direction was provided to staff. Yes.
Just clarification, the second bullet was removed. The agenda was removed.
Yes, and in the, sorry, yes, in the original, the second bullet in the original closed session agenda regarding the Emma Street servicing, that was removed from closed session and will be dealt with at the August 24th council meeting in open session. So if we could have a mover, we need a mover and seconder for that rise and report recommendation. Moved by Councillor Porter, seconded by Councillor Parks. All in favor? And motion's passed. Thank you. Just before we proceed, I'll just make note that the Mayor Brzee has sent his regrets, and that's why I'm in the chair tonight as the Deputy Mayor stepping in to fill in for the Mayor. And Councillor Gordon also sent his regrets for tonight. So they will not be attending the meeting or taking part. So the next agenda item is open forum. We have 2 members that have requested to speak during the open forum this evening. And so we will bring in Mr. Armitage. We'll just alphabetically. We'll bring him in to speak, and I'll just make a note that we haven't had open forum for a while. So just a reminder that this period is for council to receive comments from the presenter, and that it's not a time for discussion or question and answer for staff or council. But we look forward to receiving your comments, and we'll be dealing with, I'm assuming, your concerns or your presentation items during the regular agenda items. So, and it is a 3-minute time limit per presentation. So, Mr. Armitage, if you're available.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. We're all getting adapted to this new technology. What I wanted to talk to you about tonight was the frontage rate report. And I've just got a simple request that council defer it until its next meeting. I've got no issue with the mathematics of the report. And I certainly want to congratulate staff on being very open and very cooperative. But, you know, as they say, the devil's in the detail. And I just had an opportunity to read the report, you know, after it was sent to all of you. I had a chance to read it over the weekend. And it doesn't pass the fairness test. And by that, what we are doing if we adopt this report, we're asking one developer to subsidize another developer. A little bit of background. I know a lot about this issue. I was the one that negotiated this bylaw with the township starting back in 2010, 2011 on behalf of Loyalist Farms. Amherst Drive was part of Plan 1019, which was all of the land west of Spears Boulevard. And the judge at the time wanted to get out from underneath the urbanization, and the township accepted the fact that, well, the adjacent landowners should pay. And the bylaw came into effect in 2012. And you'll notice that there's over $500,000 in the reserve fund now. That's entirely money contributed by my company. And the original bylaw had an inflationary factor of 5%. And we've learned since over the last 8 years, the inflationary has only been 2%. So where this year, had we gone ahead with Brooklyn Square 2, which is delayed because of pandemic, we would have been paying almost $900 in frontage fees. A much lower frontage fee is the fair fee. So if this report is accepted, we are being asked to support the developer of the shopping center lands. Because that developer will only be asked to pay starting in 2020 a fee in the $500 range, whereas we've been overpaying. And so I just feel we need a little bit more time for consultation. And I just think it's fair in the issues and the fairness of transparency that we defer this issue until your next meeting. And again, it just comes back to fairness. Should one developer be compelled to subsidize another developer in the township? And that's essentially my presentation. I've been involved with Loyalist Township since 1973. I added it up today. That's 47 years. It's older than most of your staff. It's the first time I've ever come to council and asked that it defer a report. Compliments to the staff for being open in communication, but it was just a last minute realization on my part that I think that the report has a bias built into it that's not fair. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Armitage, for that. And yes, we'll be dealing with that later in the agenda, that item. So those are good points to bring forward long-term developer in the township. Thank you very much. We appreciate the input. So I believe we have another presenter, Mr. Sloan.
Point of order?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Ought we to receive the delegation formally? No?
Yeah, apparently we don't have to. I was thinking we do both at the same time, but in open forum, I guess we're just receiving some information. So, okay, thank you. Good to clarify and make sure. I appreciate that. So if Mr. Sloan is in the audience.
Yes, Deputy Mayor, thank you for inviting me to present at the meeting. And I've had the opportunity to correspond with you over the years regarding Brandon Road. And I know you received the petition signed by a number of my neighbors in June. And a report was sent to council prepared by Mr. Scott. And I had an opportunity to review that report over the weekend. And I prepared a written response to that and sent it to the clerk today. I'm not sure if it has been distributed to the council members or not.
It was distributed late today. I'm not sure if everyone has seen it yet or not, but yes, we are.
Right. And I took issue with a number of the points that were made in the report by Mr. Scott. He seems to lump together Brandon Road with all of the other 110 kilometers or so of rural roads in Loyalist Township. And the point I made out in my response is that I think Brandon Road is really an exceptional situation in that we have the Harrison Quarry located on the road. And for the councillors that aren't familiar with Brandon Road, it's a U-shaped road, and the east arm is subjected to the truck traffic from the quarry. So it really is a designated truck zone, and that was a decision made by council some years ago. And as a result of that, the truck traffic has quite a significant impact on the quality of the road surface. And Mr. Hagedorn and Councillor Porter and others have received letters and emails from me over the years regarding my frustrations with the quality of the road, and my neighbors are in agreement with that, and that led to our petition being submitted to council, looking to consider putting a hard surface on the road, because I think in spite of all the efforts of the township crews over many years, there hasn't been much success really in keeping the road surface to an acceptable quality. We have issues with potholes for a large part of the year. In the wintertime, with climate change, we've seen milder winters, lots of moisture, a real problem with mud. And then in the summertime, being warmer and drier, dust clouds have been an ever-present kind of reality for us here on Brandon Road. And I think in spite of the mitigation efforts that have been made by the township crews, it hasn't been very successful. And we think that a hard surface is really the only acceptable kind of solution to our road situation here. And I pointed out in my response to Mr. Scott's report that I don't see that a financial analysis has ever been made of what the costs and savings would be around paving the road. And he did mention in his report that rural properties are assessed at a lower level because of the road condition. And certainly if the road were improved, I presume that would also have an impact on property values, which would improve the bottom line of council. And one other point I raised was whether it would be worth considering borrowing money to pave the road, because actually the Harrison Quarry provides significant royalties to the township every year, which I think could be used to reduce the cost of borrowing. And interest rates being as low as they are right now, I think it's something that council might want to consider. I think that's pretty much the gist of my response. And just to let everyone on council know, this has been an issue that's been in the thorn of Mr. Hagedorn and other people's sides for approximately 10 years now, since the quarry opened here. And just to reiterate, I think we have a kind of unique situation here on Brandon Road. It's not just your typical rural road with low volume traffic. The traffic that we have is not large volume, but it has large impact.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sloan, for presenting that. And the only follow-up comment I have is I didn't really see it as a thorn in my side. I saw it as a point of interest. But that's just one way of looking at it. So thank you. I appreciate you bringing this forward. And yes, we did receive the petition. And if the individual councilors have not had time to review your submission today, then they do have it, so they'll be able to. So
one last point, if I may, Deputy Mayor.
Yes.
It was mentioned in his report that all of this will be taken to be discussed at the Rural Roads Strategy, Rural Road Improvement Strategy meeting, but won't be for another 2 years, and we don't really find that timeline acceptable to put things off for another 2 years, and we hope that council will be able to respond to our situation sooner than that.
Okay. Thank you for that point.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. And so we have that for consideration later in the meeting as well. And sorry, I'm just making a quick note of that last bullet that he made. So that's all we had for speakers in the open forum. So we'll move ahead to the public meeting. Excuse me. Catch up with where I am here. So I have some to read here. The preamble for the public meeting. A public meeting is being held in accordance with the provisions of section 17, 15, 3412, and 5120 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to consider an amendment to the Loyalist Township Official Plan, amendment to the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2001-38, as amended, and a plan of subdivision. The proposed subdivision seeks approval for a draft plan of subdivision consisting of 47 single detached lots and a parcel of land to be added to an existing seniors residence. The plan also includes 2 new municipal rights of way connecting Briscoe Street, Manitou Crescent, and Park Crescent in Amherst View. The proposed official plan amendment to the Loyalist Township Official Plan proposes to redesignate 0.19 hectares of land from low density residential to medium density residential, to add land to a seniors apartment built in phase 1 of the Loyalist Shores development. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone 0.19 hectares of land from residential type 3 exception 15 zone to residential type 6 exception 1 RS-6 zone, to add land to a senior apartment built in phase 1 of the Loyalist Shores development. Council shall hear in person or by her counsel, solicitor or agent, any persons who claims to be affected by this application. So we're now in the public meeting portion of it. So I'll just ask the clerk, have we had any indication if anyone wants to come in, or is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this?
Just let this let the report writer,
Pardon me?
let the report writer speak to it.
Right. Okay. Sorry, a point of order for myself that I was just reminded. We have some staff available. I don't, is there a staff member that would like to speak to this report prior to opening it up to the public? Dave, Mr. Casemore?
Good evening. How are you doing? Just not to repeat everything that you had said, Mr. Hagedorn, about the applications. I just want to add that we have had 2 residents, one submit a letter, Mr. Bull, which I think made the agenda. And then this evening we had a late one submit an email to myself, which I don't think has been provided as of yet, from Debbie Stephenhagen and Alex Strode, which will make sure it's provided for council's consideration before a recommendation's made, which will be at the next available meeting. Other than that, I think we're probably good to go to move forward with the public meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Casemore. So at this point, we can open it up then to the public. If there's a member of the public that would like to address council.
I believe I have an individual.
There is one.
Mr. Nielsen?
Good evening. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, good evening. Please go ahead and present what you'd like to for council.
Yes, I have a presentation prepared. Can you guys see that right now?
No.
No. Does the clerk have that available?
I can if he wants to email it.
If you would email it to the clerk, she says she can share it.
Okay.
Just clerk@loyalist.ca.
Were you able to send that to the clerk?
Yep, I just sent that on, so should
Okay.
have it there any second.
It'll be coming in shortly then.
In the meantime, I guess I can get started and we can kind of catch up once she gets the presentation.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, members of council. Thanks for the opportunity to present phase 2 of Loyal Shores subdivision to you tonight. My name is Kyle Nielsen with Forefront Engineering. I'll be your presenter tonight on behalf of S.S.B Associates. Thanks for joining us to discuss the proposed development at 16 Manitou East in Amherst. I've prepared a brief presentation to present the proposal and we'll take questions and comments. The subject property is in Amherst and encompassed by 3 roads: Manitou Crescent East, Briscoe Street, and Park Crescent. A draft plan of subdivision is proposed to create the proposed lot fabric for the plan of subdivision. A zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment are proposed to align the boundaries with the proposed lot fabric. In this case, the zoning and official plan amendments are mainly technical in nature, and they are not proposed to allow additional development. This parcel of land previously had a draft plan of subdivision, which proposed 78 single detached dwelling lots for residential development and 1 retirement home block. 26 lots fronting Manitou Crescent East have been registered to date. That was developed as with the retirement home, as phase 1 of the development. So 52 lots have not been registered, and the draft plan approval has expired for the remaining lots, which are the subject of tonight's conversation. The retirement home block has been developed and was designed to account for the proposed residential development. This proposal includes increasing the open space on the retirement home block. Just checking in with the clerk. Did you receive that presentation?
I've not received it yet.
So just to reiterate, the initial phase included 26 lots along Park Crescent and then Manitou Crescent East. And then as part of that, the existing building was developed on site into a retirement home.
I believe the clerk has received it now, and she's in the process of trying to share it with the rest of council.
Perfect. Yes. So if you go to the next slide. So this is the subject site in Amherst. Next slide, please. Again, so draft plan of subdivision is proposed to create the proposed lot fabric. The zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment are proposed to align those plans with the lot fabric. Next slide. The lots highlighted in blue that front the existing streets, that's phase 1 of the development. Those lots have been developed. And then as you can see, there's addition added to the existing building that was on the site, and that's the location of the retirement home. Next slide. This is the existing retirement home site. Next slide, please. Phase 1 of the subdivisions on your plan shown. Next slide, please. So the subject tonight is the proposed draft plan is for 47 single detached dwelling lots, opposed to the previous proposed 52 lots. Through consultation with the owner, we've decided to provide the retirement home block with more open space, allowing for the entire west side of the building to be viewed from the street. This was possible by removing 5 lots previously proposed below lots 1, 2, and 3. Next slide. Here's the zoning map for Amherst. Next slide, please. The blue is the surrounding site area. Next slide, please. Currently, the zoning on site is comprised of R3-15 and R6-1. The R3-15 zoning provisions on the slide allow the proposed single detached dwellings, and the R6-1 zone allow for the existing retirement home. To be clear, no further development is proposed on the retirement home block. Next slide. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment is mainly technical in nature to align the existing zones with the proposed lot fabric. The dashed line above depicts the existing zoning boundary, and the bold line depicts the proposed boundary. The plan is to reduce the number of single detached dwelling lots by 5 on site, while increasing the open space for the existing retirement home. Next slide. Schedule C from the township official plans on your screen. Next slide. The site is comprised of both low and medium density areas on site. The low density corresponds to the single detached residential, and the medium density corresponds to the retirement home. Next slide, please. The existing official plan boundaries are depicted in bold. Low density residential as it relates to this application includes single detached dwellings with a maximum density of 31 units per hectare. Medium density residential includes the retirement home block with a maximum density of 50 units per hectare. Next slide, please. The dashed blue line above is the existing boundary between low and medium density residential designations. The bold lines are the proposed boundary with the proposed densities below the maximum densities allowed in the official plan. 25 proposed versus 30 allowed for the low density, 47 proposed versus 60 allowed for the medium density. The proposal is consistent with the provincial policy statement. Proposed dwelling types and densities on site are in conformance with the official plan and are compatible with the neighborhood. This development is infill type development in close proximity to services and transit. Stormwater management controls on site support the proposed development and enhance water quality and quantity in the surrounding area. Cash in lieu of parkland was previously provided to enhance parks within the surrounding neighborhood. In summary, the proposed plan includes 47 single detached residential lots versus the previous approved 52. Zoning and official plan boundary adjustments are proposed to align the proposed subdivision lot fabric. The developer undertook some additional assessments for the proposed development. In support of the application, we engaged GHG to review the previous traffic impact study with new traffic counts. From this analysis, there were no further recommendations. They found the existing traffic volumes to be in line with the projected traffic demands of the previous assessment. Forefront reviewed the stormwater management plans with the current application and regulations and confirmed the plans support the proposed development. Previous studies regarding this file are available from Loyalist Township and are fairly extensive. So the next steps, Loyalist Township will draft a recommendation report for approval or deferral for council consideration. Public comments can be directed to Loyalist Dave Casemore. Deputy Mayor or members of council, if you have any questions of me at this time, please feel free to ask.
Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Nielsen. Council, is there any questions or for the presenter? Seeing none. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate the input. Doesn't appear to be any questions at this time, so your information is well received.
Thank you very much.
So is there, I'm just going to ask if there's anyone else in of the public that would like to address council on this topic. I'm not seeing any. So with that, we'll conclude the open house then. So back to council, there is a recommendation attached to the report for our consideration. Councillor Porter.
Move to receive the report and adopt the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Budrick, he's seconded. Seconded by Councillor Budrick. Any mover? Any comments?
No.
Seconder? None. Other council? None. Okay. Seeing none, we'll call the question then. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is passed. Thank you. So that concludes the public meeting portion. So we'll move on into the agenda for council. So the next item, 5.1, is motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Townsend, seconded by Councillor Porter. And there were no additions or deletions in this, none for the clerk. Thank you. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Motion is carried unanimously. Ask if there's a declaration of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof for tonight's meeting. And yes,
Just we have had one from the mayor in regards to item, sorry, the
oh,
one that was just on the item 4.1. So he has declared.
okay. So the mayor has declared on item 4.1 the public meeting, and the paperwork has or will be submitted.
Has been submitted. Yeah.
Has been submitted. Okay. And seeing none other, we'll move on to the minutes. Confirmation of the minutes for the 31st session of regular council in June 22nd, 2020. Any errors or omissions noted by council? Seeing none, could we have a motion then to, moved by Councillor Townsend, seconded by Councillor Porter, to receive those. And call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. And I think I just turned my paper over the wrong way. I did. So, moving on to item number 10. So 10.1, Emergency Control Group Update Report. There is a report that was submitted from the CAO, and I see he's in the audience. So is there anything further that CAO would like to provide on this report?
I have nothing further to add, Deputy Mayor.
Nothing. Thank you. Any questions from council? And seeing none, we have a recommendation to be received for information. Moved by Councillor Budrick, seconded by Councillor Parks. Mover, any comments? No. Seconder? None. Rest of council? Councillor Porter.
I just have a few comments about the report. Thanks very much for the report. I believe the motion that came out of the last council meeting was moved by Councillor Townend, and I did second it. And I believe the motion was to provide rationale for the continuation of the state of emergency. Now, I noticed in the report that the majority of the items, there is a couple of items that are rationale, but the majority of the items in the report are basically, in my opinion, are listed as actions and responses to the state of emergency, as opposed to the rationale for the continued state of emergency. And in specific, one of the points being that we need to hold virtual council meetings, that's not a rationale for a state of emergency. That's more of a response for a state of emergency. I was a little bit surprised by that. I would have liked to have seen more information in respect to, I guess, referencing back to the original state of emergency, why it was originally declared. And I will make a couple of comments about that. It was my understanding that it was declared a state of emergency because we were very concerned about our healthcare system being overwhelmed and our emergency services being overwhelmed. So I would have liked to have seen some sort of information about that as to whether that transpired or not. I don't believe it did, but we have nothing official that has come out to address that. As well as we have a lot more information than we had at the beginning of this state of emergency. And I would have liked to have seen some rationale to address that information that we did not have as opposed to what we have now, and why we need to continue it. So that I have to say I am disappointed about. And I guess that's just my comments.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Porter. You got those. I was seeing you were writing there, Mr. Silver. I'm assuming you made note of all those points that was addressed. Okay. Any other from the rest of council? Seeing none. And sorry, I just did I have a mover and seconder on that? I did. Yes. Okay, good. So no other comments then? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of? Motion is passed. So item 11. Yes. Yes, Councillor Porter?
I have a follow-up motion, if I may.
Okay, please proceed.
I move that the CAO provide additional report addressing the concerns that I have raised. As well, I'd like a letter of questions to be sent to our public health unit, Dr. Moore in particular, requesting information on the mandatory wearing of masks in our municipality, in our locality, region, and whether it be provincial or federal. In as much as we were, I guess I've received a lot of questions in regards to the N95 mask. That at the beginning of this pandemic, we were advised that the N95 mask was the only mask that would be effective against this virus.
If
So
I
I'd
could,
like that question posed.
if I could, okay. Sorry, I was just, you're kind of speaking to the motion instead of making the motion. So the motion was for a follow-up report and for a letter to be drafted with questions to the health unit, which would be, and with the responses coming back to council. Did I grasp that correctly?
Correct, correct.
Okay. So moved. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Townsend. Okay, sorry. Now, Councillor Porter, if you would like to expand any more, please proceed.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we have an official record as to the state of emergency, as well as the rationale for why the state of emergency continues. And I know the report did address some of that rationale, but not all of it. I believe it could have been expanded upon, as I said, referencing back the original reasons, the original rationale for declaring it in the first place. And I think that needs to be addressed. As well, I think that it's only fair for me to, or other council members, to be able to answer that question about the masks with the proper information. And, you know, I'm really quite tired of saying, well, I really don't know the answer to that question. And I have committed to finding that out. And I think it's important to get the information that we need in order to answer questions or to be able to address people's concerns properly and accordingly.
Thank you. Seconder, do you have additional comments?
Yeah, I mean, I personally was satisfied by the report, but I think as a general rule, as colleagues, if colleagues feel that they want more information, I think that should be supported. In terms of the masks, I think a lot of the information about masks is available. However, you know, if people are wanting that information to be made available, you know, more so through the medium of our township communication infrastructure and brought to people's attention that way. I mean, the dissemination of good and useful information, you can't have enough of it. So, if people are asking that for us to do a little more of that with respect to the masks in particular, I don't see any harm in that.
Okay, thank you. The rest of council, anyone have comment? Okay. Just check with the CAO to make sure that the motion is clear and actionable.
Yes, Mr. Deputy Mayor, yes, it is clear. I may follow up with Councillor Porter just to ensure that I get all the points that she would like included in the letter to Dr. Moore, but I can do that tomorrow or the day after that.
Yes, and I'm assuming that some of the responses to that will be, as Councillor Townsend noted, might be just a further clarification or expansion on some of the comments and what is already on the website, but
absolutely
maybe a little expansion or something. Okay, very good. Thank you. Back to the mover. Any further questions or comments?
No, I just requested a recorded vote, please.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. So at this point, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Pardon me. Sorry, did you ask for a recorded vote?
Yes, I did.
My apologies, I didn't hear that part. Okay, sorry. So yes, we will turn it over to the clerk for the recorded vote then.
The recorded vote will start with Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Townend,
Yes.
Councillor Budurk,
Yes.
Councillor Parks,
Yes.
and Deputy Mayor.
Yes.
That's 5 yeses. It's carried.
Okay, motion carried. Thank you. So moving on to item 11, the COVID-19 projected net financial impact. We have a report available from our Deputy Treasurer, and he is in the audience as well. There we are. Thank you for attending. Any further comments regarding this? Mr. Renier?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor Townsend.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Just a question for the Deputy Treasurer. Can he confirm that the mask donation in the amount equivalent to the value of $10,000 that was referred to in the report was donated, in fact, by Lafarge? Can he confirm that?
Yes, I can confirm that. That's who made that donation.
All right, thank you very much.
And any other questions from council? I just have one to the deputy. Was the masks that were provided, I know there were 10,000 masks, was that the dollar value as well? Or I'm just not sure if I read the report correctly.
The impression I had was it was $10,000 worth of masks.
Okay.
It's normally in lieu of their normal Bath Canada Day donation for fireworks. They made this donation in lieu of that due to the current circumstances.
And yes. Okay, thank you very much. And yes, we're very thankful for Lafarge donating those to the township. So with no further questions, we have a recommendation to be received for information. Councillor Townsend?
I have a motion to that effect, but an additional move, if I may.
Okay. Are you doing it all as one motion, or you?
All is one, and if I don't get support for it, I can always separate the two.
Okay, please proceed then.
So I move to receive the report for information, and I further move that in light of new information received by council, that staff be instructed to cease the application of the one untagged bag of garbage policy effective July 27th, and that the public be notified at the earliest convenience of staff.
Councillor Porter?
Point of order.
Yes, proceed.
According to the rules of procedure, we need a motion to reconsider the decision if the decision is a reconsideration within 1 year. And we made the decision to continue the one bag tag free whilst the state of emergency continues. So in order, in my opinion, or I guess in the rules of procedure, it does say to reconsider that. We have to wait a year or a motion to reconsider first.
Okay.
Follow up to that point of order.
Councillor Townsend?
I believe that the standard practice is that if new information has been received, that council can make a new decision. But I obviously defer to the clerk on Councillor Porter's point of order.
And I'm just going to turn to the clerk for confirmation, because I'm not sure if we've actually received any new information or if it was just additional information with a new timeline. So I'm just going to refer to the clerk.
It's a new report. So the last time this was brought up, the question was whether it was a reconsideration. It's not a reconsideration unless it's during the same meeting. So this would be a new motion, or it would be that it would be have to, let me see here on that one, it would be that it would need a 2/3 vote to bring it back, to do something with the motion that's already on the table. It can't be a reconsideration. It would be either a motion to deal with the report as it is now, the report that's before council, or it would be, if it's going back to the motion that was made from the last report, then it would be a 2/3 to bring it back for further discussion, like a notice of motion.
You're on mute, Deputy Mayor.
You're on mute.
Sorry, I was muting so we didn't get echo in here, and I wasn't thinking. I just want to make sure I'm very clear with the clerk whether this motion can proceed the way it stands, or if we need to do a reconsideration.
And my understanding is it's not the motion that's presented through the Councillor Townend is that it is based on the report that is before council now, with new information is what he's putting forward.
Okay. So the motion can stand as it's presented right now then?
If there's a seconder.
Okay. Okay. So the ruling is that the motion can stand the way it is, providing that it is seconded, and then council can act on it. Seconded by Councillor Budrick. Okay. Mover, would you like to speak to the motion?
Sure. So from my perspective, the approach of the decision that we made on June 8th to continue this policy was predicated on the assumption that the emergency order would be lifted sooner rather than later. That not being the case, I think we ought to reconsider our position and take another look at whether we should continue to fund this policy. From my perspective, the approach of waiting government subsidy to cover the shortfall for this policy is kind of problematic. First of all, because I'm not entirely convinced that subsidy would come, at least not enough to cover the full expense of something like this, which is ultimately a lost revenue that is self-inflicted and not strictly necessary, such as policies related to COVID safety. For example, the suspension of ferry tickets. Even if the subsidy were available, taxpayers are then paying the $2.50 no matter what. So even closer to home, the shortfalls in our budget will need to be met one way or the other. So all residents will pay one way or the other. The other thing is, and again, this is in light of new information, Napanee and Kingston have already reverted to their original policy. So we wouldn't be in line with our neighbors in continuing with this. And their rationale has been similar in the fact that the emergency is due to continue for a longer term. So continuing this policy represents the largest portion of what our projected shortfalls are to be. And its suspension would mean significant savings. So I personally would rather change course on this decision now in light of all of this new information than face the possibility later of potentially needing to consider more serious cuts, such as cuts to staffing or other measures which might be necessary.
Thank you. Seconder, do you want to add comment?
Just simply, I mean, for those, I mean, this is a great report from the Deputy Treasurer. And if you look at the loss of revenue, the number one item, it basically within $6,200 equates to what we are in deficit of. And like Councillor Townend said, if it gets to a drastic situation where we have to cut in other areas to make up for the shortfall, it could hurt in far larger ways.
Thank you. Comments? Anyone else on council? Councillor Porter?
Yeah, I am going to support the motion because I agree with what Councillor Townend has been saying, and I see that the numbers, the deficit, I guess for lack of a better word, continues to grow, and the majority of that has been caused by the bag tag program being suspended. But I would also like to add that the dire situation of some of our residents still exists. Not everybody has worked through this. Not everybody has been paid through this. And there are those people out there that are still in dire straits from this and are not back to a normal working environment. So although I'm going to support the motion, I would like to see, or I would like to say that, and maybe it would be a follow-up motion that I will do, is that if someone is in that situation, perhaps they can apply to the township for some free bag tags. I don't know if that exists or not.
Okay, thank you. Other comments from council? Let's see. Seeing none, just before I go back to the mover, I'm just going to put my speak to it myself. I have been one that in the past has promoted this continuing. I think, as Councillor Porter said, there is a need in the community still, and I would have liked to have seen this. I'm proud. I'm not. I see where you're coming from with it being the largest expense. I also know that in my mind, when we passed this, and then the last time when we revisited it, my thoughts were until at least we get into stage 3, so that more workers can be back to work and back on a steady income, that this support would be there. I still feel that way because I do see that there's a lot of people in the community that are still financially impacted. There are subsidies, methods to have some basic income, but certainly not what some of their income was before, and some of it still is sitting very, very low. So that's my thoughts on it. Is that was my intention when I wanted this to keep going, and in my mind, we're not quite there. We're getting close, but we're not quite there to where I'm comfortable reinstating it for everyone. But the majority of council will make that decision. So, and with that, back to the mover for final comment. Nothing further. Okay, with that, I will call the question then. So the motion, just to make sure, the motion was to receive for information and that the bag tag would be reinstated as of July 27th. That was the date? Very well. And the clerk has that. Oh, perfect. Okay, with that, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Councillor Porter.
I'd like to do a follow-up motion if I may.
Please proceed.
Yes, I move that township accepts a statement from those that cannot afford the bag tags and that those people are given bag tags until the state of emergency is lifted. If I get a sec, I know doesn't sound very good. I'm not sure how that would work, but I'd like to see something in place. And if I get a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Budrick? Councillor Porter, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, the reason I supported also the last motion was that there is a lot of people that can still afford bag tags whose income have not been drastically affected, and some whose income have improved with the subsidies that are available. So there are several of our residents that can afford to buy bag tags, but I know that there are some that can't. And that they are in dire straits, as the deputy mayor pointed out as well. So I'd like some sort of program or some sort of application where if this is going to create even more hardship for those, that they can go into the township and actually get some bag tags for free during this state of emergency. And would leave it up to people's own judgment and the honor system.
Okay, thank you. Seconder, any comments? None? I just have a question to the mover, I guess, just for clarification for me. At the end, you said leave it up to people's own judgment. So would you be looking for some type of verification of loss of income, or just that they sign for it? And the other thing was, would it be the equivalent of one bag tag per week, similar to what was in place, or was in place up until the 27th?
Yes, it would be one bag tag a week, and I would when I said leave, so sort of on the honor system, is that I don't think we have the capability of asking for a means test or going through a lot of rigmarole to do that. I think that a lot of our residents do have pride, and anybody that can afford it probably won't go in and ask for bag tags. We would leave it up to those that are in dire straits and maybe make a statement to that effect.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Treasurer?
Hi, I maybe make a suggestion. We do provide bag tags for medical exemptions. So I would suggest following a similar application method just for tracking, just to avoid the situation of people coming in and asking for bag tags and you're just handing them out. So maybe a formal process, not that we're necessarily verifying income, but at least there's a formal documented process similar to the medical bag tag exemption that we do. That would probably be my suggestion from an administrative point of view, but just a suggestion.
And that way we would be able to track for budgeting purposes as well then the costs.
It just kind of controls them going out more instead of just kind of handing them out as people come in.
Okay. So that sounds reasonable to me. Councillor Porter is the mover and Councillor Budrick is a seconder. Are you in favor of that, that staff would administer it so that we would be able to track the expenses?
Yes, absolutely. I think that I don't know what the process is for the medical exemption, how onerous it is, but I would hope that this process would be as less painful as possible for anybody applying, and it wouldn't be onerous, and it wouldn't be too detailed and too bureaucratically cumbersome.
Thank you. Councillor Budrick, are you in agreement with that step?
Absolutely, tracking it is exactly what we should be doing.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So we have the mover and seconder has spoken. Is there anyone else on council that wants to comment? Councillor Townsend?
Yeah, I'm happy to support it. I mean, I think that when we had the discussion earlier in the pandemic related to people's utilities bills and tax bills, you know, staff have continually promoted an approach to our resident public to approach the township. If anybody is in need, that you know, staff are willing and desire to be as flexible as they can be in helping our residents out. And I think the motion speaks to that approach. So I see no harm in that at all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Parks?
I too will support this motion. I just think it's an opportunity for the people that are not back to work and the ones that are still struggling to meet their financial commitments to be able to just have a little bit of a break until they are back to work and things are a little bit more normal.
Thank you. And just before going back to the mover, I think this is a good step as well. It's a humanitarian step to be able to take. I agree staff have come up with every idea they can to try and make sure that our residents are taken care of. I think this is a step that we can take to ensure that their needs are being addressed as they're needed. So I appreciate that. And back to the mover, Councillor Porter. Any further comment? Nothing further. So with that, I will call the question. All in favor? And passed unanimously. Thank you. Okay, if there's no further follow-ups. Very good. Okay, so that was item 11. So the next item is 12.1, Brandon Road request for service level upgrade. And we have Mr. Scott, were you in the audience for this item, or? There we are. Do you have anything to add to the report that's before council?
Sorry, just getting unmuted here. Just wanted to note that in response to Mr. Sloan's presentation earlier today, that Brandon Road is inspected once per month as required under our minimum maintenance standards. Typically, we don't try and grade the roads once the calcium goes down for the course of the entire summer. Grading the road defeats the purpose of putting the calcium down, so we would typically see increased dust complaints. So often, like I say, we do try to allow the roads to stretch out as long as we can in the summer before regrading. And Mr. Sloan had also mentioned the cost analysis, and that's something we've definitely been talking about as part of the rural road improvement strategy that's being developed under the strategic plan initiative. And I'd certainly be happy to answer any of the questions that council has on the report.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council for Mr. Scott? Councillor Porter?
Through you, Mr. Chair. In your report, it says that we get approximately 37,000 in royalties. Is that, how many quarries does that come from, or is that just the one quarry?
The township receives $150,000 a year under the TORAC royalty funds. of which council has, and that's for all the quarries within the township. And council, as part of the 2020 budget deliberations, asked for, I believe it's 25% for 2020 and rising, I believe it rises to 50%. The chair could probably confirm that. I believe it's his motion at budget time to do that. It would rise to 50% for next year.
If I may, on that topic, yes, I believe the motion that went through at budget time was it went to 50 next year, and then the next year was 100% into reserves for roads adversely impacted by quarry operations.
So follow up to that, if I may. Thank you for that clarification. I read that wrong, and you've explained it. So, but how much in royalties do we get from the actual Harrison quarry that affects this particular?
I'm not sure that we actually get a breakdown. I'd have to look into that. I just know from the budget figure, it's 150,000 for all the quarries in the township. So I suspect it would be a fairly small portion of that.
Okay, Councilor Porter, if I may, if I can just try to help answer that last question, Councilor Porter. From dealings with TAPMO, I believe that the township just receives a royalty check, a lump sum, and is not broke down by quarry. It's based on the tonnages, total tonnages that are extracted from quarries. And so I'm not sure that we have a breakdown. I don't think we do have a breakdown what the royalties would come from each quarry. It's just from within the township, all lumped together.
I do have a follow-up, if I may.
Yes.
That brought me to my next question. It reminded me of another question in that Brandon Road, that section of Brandon Road in question, is that treated any differently than any of the other gravel roads in our municipality, or does that get any kind of, I know you say that it gets re-graveled, all roads get re-graveled every 2 years, so to speak. Does Brandon Road get the same treatment as every other gravel road in the township?
Brandon Road has typically received the same treatment as all other roads within the township. This year, I made the decision based on the results that we had last year to go ahead and resurface it a second time. So it's actually had twice as much gravel as a normal township gravel road. And we want to see how the road performs going into this fall. It was more of a trial. We're also experimenting with using additional dust suppressants perhaps this fall to see if that will extend the need to, or reduce the need for grading into the winter months. That's the challenge we're having with all our gravel roads. They're not freezing up during the winter time, and as a result, we're having to grade them. And when we're grading under wet conditions, then you get the soupy mess that people refer to. So we're hoping, we would like to see what the additional calcium would do, whether that will stabilize the road farther into the fall, reducing the need for grading.
Does that address your questions then, Councillor Porter?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions from other members of council for Mr. Scott? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Scott, for attending and taking the questions. Did I see your hand up, Councillor Townsend?
Yeah, I motion to receive the report and adopt the recommendation.
Okay, motion made. Seconder? Seconded by Councillor Porter. Mover, would you like to make comment?
Yeah, I would. I think it's worth mentioning that in relative terms, Mr. Scott is new to his role. And almost immediately he identified the improvement of rural roads as a #1 priority for him in that role. And as much as 2022 seems some time away, comprehensive, cost-effective, long-term improvement does take time to carefully consider. So I do appreciate that for residents such as Mr. Sloan, improvements seem slow and a long time in coming, and I do, but they are coming. And in calling for patience, I'm not intending to be trite or ignorant at all. As a resident of Amherst Island and the councillor for Amherst Island, I am no stranger whatsoever to complaints related to the state of gravel roads. I can say that island roads are no stranger to heavy truck traffic containing aggregate. So I don't think from that point of view that Brandon Road is all that unique in the context of gravel roads and Loyalist, though again, I do appreciate the comments made by Mr. Sloan with respect to the Harrison quarry traffic in particular. I can also say that since assuming his role as manager of public works on the island, certainly noticeable improvements have been observed. So I'm more than confident that Brandon Road will continue to see its due attention for further improvement, though this may not mean a hard surface in the near future. The larger issue I would bring us to that roads like Brandon Road represent, however, is the incessant reality that municipalities are burdened with more cents on the dollar of infrastructure and service responsibility than they're awarded through the tax system. So the ratios typically cited as being that municipalities bear 60% of the responsibility for infrastructure and get 9 cents on that same dollar to do that work. This gross unfairness has been a glaring problem for years in Ontario, and COVID-19 has only reinforced it. So I would encourage as a larger issue for residents to lobby their members of provincial parliament to propose legislative changes to overhaul the way in which municipalities are funded and compensated in order to better improve our need to be improved points of infrastructure.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Excuse me. Seconder, any comment?
Yeah, just to add to what Councillor Townend has said is that to put things into perspective, and a lot of people do not realize this, but for every $100,000 of improvements that we make, or every $100,000 that we spend, it results in a 1% tax increase across the board. So we have to be cognizant of that, and we have to we do certainly appreciate that that Brandon Road is a road that needs attention, and there are other roads in our municipality that need as much attention as well. And it is cost prohibitive for a municipality of our size to start paving all of the granular roads, and I agree with Councillor Townend that we need to start lobbying the provincial government and resident groups such as the one that Mr. Sloan has spoken for tonight. It would be very much appreciated if they did the same.
Thank you. Any other member of council want to comment on the motion? Seeing none. Just before I put it back to the mover, both the mover and seconder made good points on the costs of it, and going forward, the steps that and asking for assistance from the residents to help us pressure higher levels of government to help share the wealth. The other thing is I appreciated Councillor Townsend's comments. I too have seen improvements in our road system in the last year and a half. I've been talking to residents, and the majority of them have all, well, I shouldn't say majority, I guess all of them have seen the improvements. So for that, I'm grateful to our staff for proceeding in that direction and making the improvements that there are. And the rural roads improvement strategy should help us move forward in the future along those lines as well. Any final comments from the mover, Councillor Townsend? None? With that then, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And motion is carried. Thank you. And on to economic development. 14.1, update to frontage fee rates for Amherst Drive urbanization. And there's Ms. Merritt. Do you have any comments, Ms. Merritt? Or Anything further on the report?
Yes, if I may, Deputy Mayor, I did hear the concern over the over contribution to the frontage fee and future developers that may or would benefit. The opposite situation where not enough funds have been raised would have to be kept in mind as well. And I'm saying that because in developing the recommendation for this report, staff considered that this is not that different than a development charge or an imposed fee. The economy landscape can vary widely. By that, I mean like construction costs will change over a period of 12 years, inflation, even interest that can be accumulated on the funds collected. So just like a development charge or an imposed fee by law, the math is reevaluated or calibrated at the end of each applicable period. So if funds are over collected, the fees for the next period are adjusted and vice versa. Typically rebates are not issued. Most often than not, these fees, like the frontage fees and imposed fees and development charge, are passed on to the purchaser of each lot. So with that said, I know it was quite a long report, a lot of details. So if council wishes, staff can go over the details that arrived at the bottom line that has been recommended. Ms. Campbell is here to help me answer these questions. Otherwise, we have nothing really further to add.
Thank you. Councillor Porter?
Yes, I'm going to move to defer to allow those affected opportunity to respond to the report.
Motion to defer. And I'm drawing a blank. We need a seconder for deferral, don't we? Yes. Seconded by Councillor Budrick. And deferrals, there's no discussion. So we need a time and a reason for the deferral. Deferral to and a reason for.
Sorry, I do have the reason from Councillor Porter. Sorry.
Yeah, defer till the next council meeting, and the reason was to allow enough opportunity for those affected by this report or subsequent decision time to comment. It's always been a little problematic when we publish these types of reports and only give people 2 to 3 days, especially over a weekend, to come back with any comments. And in order to ensure that we hear the comments, I think it's important that we allow that time.
Okay, so we've motioned to defer. It's moved and seconded. With that, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. So moving on to item 16.1, Lodge Coffee House. Sorry, I'm just making sure I'm still looking at the right side of the paper here. Okay, so we have a recommendation. Any questions from council before we proceed? Seeing none, there is a recommendation. What's council's wishes? Councillor Porter?
Move to receive and adopt the recommendation to sign.
Seconder? Councillor Parks? Mover, any comment?
Nope.
No. Seconder? None? Rest of council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Everyone in favor? Motion's passed. And 16.2, Alcohol Gaming Commission of Ontario Municipal Information Forum for Quesada Burritos and Tacos. Any questions from council? Seeing none, there is a recommendation. What's council's wishes? Councilor Townsend?
I'll motion to receive and adopt the recommendation.
Thank you. Second, Councillor Budrick. Mover, comment? None. Seconder? None. Remainder of council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion's passed. And that takes us to the consent agenda. And I need to read this, don't I?
Just number 17, if there's any notes.
Oh, sorry. Number 17, notice of motion or direct motion. Is there any from council? Seeing none. Thank you. So with the consent agenda, for the purpose of convenience and for expediting meetings, matters of business that are of repetitive or routine nature are included in the consent agenda. All such matters of business contained in the consent agenda are voted on collectively. A particular matter of business may be singled out from the consent agenda for debate or for a separate vote upon the request of any councillor. In the case of a separate vote, the excluded matter of business is severed from the consent agenda. Each and every matter of business contained in the consent agenda is recorded separately in the minutes of the meeting. So with all the items in the consent agenda from 18 to, that includes number 22, right? Yes, through to 22. Is there any items that any council member wants extracted? Seeing none, we'll be looking for a motion. Councillor Porter?
Move to receive.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Budrick. Any comments from the mover?
No.
None. Seconder? None. Any other member? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Motion is passed. And that brings us down to members' privilege. Councillor Townsend?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, or Mr. Chair. Let me just find my comments here. Yes, I'd just like to use my member's privilege to congratulate Keith Miller today on his 80th birthday. Keith is a famed, respected, and valued member of the Amherst Island community, rightly celebrated for his many and varied contributions to island life. He is one of those unique characters that has so shaped his community that he has become an indivisible and intrinsic part of its identity. Though I'm sure Keith would receive this with one of his archetypal quips of melancholic humor, I nevertheless extend Keith my best wishes for many more happy returns.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. And yes, Keith Miller is, he stands out in everyone's mind that he's met. I met him we were on a committee together, and it made the committee very enjoyable. Any other members of council? Seeing none. We have a list of upcoming meeting dates attached in our agenda, pushing us through the rest of the summer. And the next item is a confirmatory bylaw. We have a mover or seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Parks, seconded by Councillor Budrick. I'm assuming there's no discussion. All in favor? Motion passed. And a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Budrick, seconded by Councillor Porter. All in favor? And motion passed. Thank you all. Thank you for enduring my first full meeting of chairing, and it was a good experience. Thank you all, and we are adjourned. Have a good night.
Thanks very much, Jim. You did a great job.